Hello everybody and welcome or welcome back. In today's video, I would like to present to you, in my opinion, the very best pattern makers and pattern brands that I would recommend for starting to sew or learning new sewing techniques, and they're free patterns to try without breaking the bank. I remember when I started sewing back in 2016, I was overwhelmed with all of the options and things to buy, how expensive everything was, and I didn't know especially what kind of fabric to choose. And what I would recommend if you are in the same boat and a bit overwhelmed is to start with a good beginner pattern. A good pattern will tell you exactly what kind of fabric to look for and what different effects you'll get with different fabrics, what notions and tools you'll need, and most importantly, show you how to change or modify the pattern to get the fit that you want, because very few bodies fit into a standard size pattern. And additionally, a lot of these pattern brands have free patterns because they know that getting into sewing is quite a financial investment, and it's to help you get into it without spending so much at first, and to test it out to see if you'd like it and like to continue. So I have 5 pattern brands to present to you today. It is mostly women's style clothing because I don't have very much experience sewing men's style clothing, and so that's what this is today. But I will link below, and don't hesitate to comment below with sewing channels or podcasts about men's style clothing or children's clothing sewing if you're interested in that, and if you'd like to recommend that to other viewers of this channel, and for me as well, because I am very curious about that as well, but that's not my specialty, that's not what I sew, and therefore I won't be talking about that today. So of the pattern brands that I'm going to present to you today, they are in no particular order except for the very first one, and it is my absolute top recommendation for learning to sew. It is how I learned to sew, and that is Seamwork Patterns. Seamwork creates patterns for contemporary casual clothes, often with vintage details from the 70s, 80s, and sometimes 90s as well. What I love about Seamwork and what makes it my absolute top recommendation is the vast amount of free sewing resources to learn how to sew or learn new sewing techniques. They have their website where they have many articles on how to learn different sewing techniques, sewing history, fashion influences, interviews with sewing creatives, and just endless amounts of inspiration. They have a podcast as well where they post, I think, weekly about sewing inspiration, sewing practice, how to balance practice and daily life, figuring out what you want to make and why. And then they also have a YouTube channel where they show off their patterns and the process of making and the process of designing a wardrobe. It's just endless inspiration, and without them I would not have been able to sew, and that's why I recommend them. I have my notes here because this is a lot of information, so please forgive me looking at my phone. But I do have a lot of information I want to give you. So they have over 200 contemporary sewing patterns, and their size range is from a 00 to 30, and it's a 34 to a 64-inch hip, for example. And what's especially useful on their pattern pages is that they have many pictures of the garments from all different angles, head to toe, close-ups, front, back, side, and on different bodies and in different fabrics to show you what kind of garments it'll make in different fabrics, which is really useful. They even sometimes have videos of the garments in movement, which is also very useful. And what's especially helpful is that they always have fit guide illustrations on 2 different body models that will show you with a line drawing how the garment fits in relation to certain body points, such as the neckline along the neck, where the hems will fall, how much ease is incorporated into a pant, for example, or a skirt. And it's just much easier to visualize how much ease is in a garment and how it will fit on different bodies and what kind of fit you would like to get from them. The pattern instructions are clear and illustrated, and they often have QR codes or little explanations within the pattern of the sewing techniques described, and they are patterns that are designed to help you learn to sew as you sew. Some of the Seamwork patterns that I've sewn before are, for example, the Margot skirt, which is a beginner pattern and easy to sew up in just a few hours. It uses a pretty solid, pretty thick, not so stretchy knit fabric or sweater knit fabric that's pretty easy to sew, and a great beginner stretch pattern, for example, that I've made in a few different colors and just recently in a chocolate brown. I've also made the Milo cardigan, which is a great oversized cardigan, and the Greer skirt, which is a knit skirt, and it's just great in its simplicity and elegance. And I've also made the Pauline skirt recently, and I made a whole vlog about that if you'd like to see me make that as well. Seamwork also has a few free patterns to help you get into sewing, such as the sorbetto top, which helps you learn how to sew a pleat, and then also how to create and sew bias binding to finish armholes and necklines. They also have the Hansi top, which is a pretty simple woven t-shirt pattern, which is great and very versatile with different kinds of fabrics, and I've made a whole video on 3 different ones that I've made of this pattern if you'd like to check that out. The first one is even a sew along if you'd like to sew along this pattern with me. And temporarily and not for long, so jump on this if you can. I'm filming this in April. They have the Madu top available for free download. It's a summer spring top in a woven fabric that uses gathers to create a crop top that's loose and airy and easy to match with high-waisted skirts and pants. My absolute very first sewing experience and pattern was actually the Seamworks Sorbetto top. I made it in an off-white Swiss dot cotton, and I remember how it felt when this 2D flat piece of fabric became a 3D garment in my hands, and how wondrous that felt. And it turned out to be too transparent for my liking, and I didn't keep it for very long, but I was so proud and it was the most perfect project. And so I'm very thankful for Seamwork, because without Seamwork I don't think that I would have been able to get into sewing so easily or been so encouraged and have so much faith that I could do it. And so I highly recommend checking them out. They do have an unlimited membership if you would like access to all 200 of their patterns, as well as video sew-alongs, their online sewing community, and their Design Your Wardrobe program. Seamwork has offered this channel a discount code of 50% off their Seamwork Unlimited membership. Seamwork also offers an online Learn to Sew clothing video course designed for absolute beginners. It covers everything from the basics of using a sewing machine to reading a pattern, and guides you through cutting, sewing, and finishing your very first projects. I'll link both resources below if you're interested. But if you're not, that's absolutely fine, and these patterns are available for purchase separately and outside of the membership. And I highly recommend checking out Seamwork, their articles, podcasts, YouTube channel, because it is an endless source of sewing inspiration and know-how, and it is just a treasure. The second pattern brand that I would recommend for beginner sewists is Helen's Closet. Helen's Closet creates contemporary clothing patterns that combine practicality with style, and they're so versatile that I have a few of their patterns and I've made them multiple times, and they are still serving me so well. They're absolute wardrobe staples. What's great about these patterns is that not only are the pattern instructions clear and illustrated, and they're website features lots of sewing techniques and how to sew. They're great patterns for learning to sew as you sew, just like Seamwork. But what Helen's Closet has in particular, in addition to the great style of their patterns, is that there are extensive instructions within the sewing pattern and on their website on how to hack the pattern or modify the pattern to get the perfect fit. So how to grade between sizes if you are different sizes like me. For example, my waist and my hip measurements are typically 2 sizes apart in most sewing pattern standard sizing, and therefore I'm constantly grading from the waist to the hip seams. And Helen's Closet patterns will walk you through with illustrations exactly how to do that, or how to lengthen or shorten patterns if you are taller or shorter than standard, or if you have a taller or shorter torso or legs, for example, to get the absolute perfect fit, so you can learn how to make a made-to-measure garment that fits your body and your style and not the opposite. Helen's Closet also publishes with, I think, each of their patterns on their blog at least 2 pattern hacks. So they show you how to hack the pattern to create a different garment out of it. For example, a dress out of a top pattern, or how to add ruffles or pleats or tiers, or I think she did one how to create a quilted jacket versus a standard jacket and how to add the quilting and finish the quilting, for example. And it's just so creative, and it is perfect if you are impatient to learn how to modify and customize the patterns that you see to your own personal style, and to add personal touches to it, or to go off and start designing or drawing patterns yourself. This is a great first step to learning how to manipulate patterns. So in addition to these excellent instructions, the designs are, in my opinion, great as well, and they have become wardrobe staples, the patterns that I've made from Helen's Closet. For example, I've made the Blackwood cardigan, which is what I'm wearing today, multiple times because it is just so practical. I've made the Donovan skirt at least 5 times because it is the most comfortable elasticated waistband skirt that is great in all occasions, for work, the weekend, casually being at home. And I love using this pattern to show off the different designs of viscose fabrics that I love to buy. And then the Elliot sweater has become an absolute wardrobe staple for me for the fall and winter. It is the perfect mock neck top because I'm always looking for different ways to keep my neck warm, and I really dislike tight turtlenecks, and it is just beautiful, elegant, and so versatile for so many different sweater knits. Helen's Closet size range is a 0 to 34, which is a 33-inch to a 62-inch hip, although that varies between their patterns. So definitely double check when you're purchasing one of these patterns to make sure that your size is available. They have a few free patterns if you'd like to try. They have the Costa tote bag, which shows you how to use different pieces of fabric to piece together a tote bag. They have the Sam apron, which is something that I've made for my husband in the past. It is a unisex pattern with two different options for the straps. There is an option for a back neck loop and a tie at the waist for closure, or there's an option for sewing a crossback apron, which is what I created for my husband. And it is really comfortable to wear. It has lots and lots of pockets that are customizable for whatever object you'd like to put in them. I sewed a pocket in the front that was big enough for his phone, for example, so he can keep it there. And it even has loops for holding towels to wipe your hands quickly. And it's just really practical. I'm thinking of making another one for myself for gardening, for example, in a nice thick green linen, but I'll have to add that to my long list of sewing projects for the future. And then there's also the Orchard top and dress. That is a great swingy, loose sort of summer pattern for lounging around in the summertime that you can try making as well if you're interested in trying to work with more flowy, loose fabrics, for example. Also, I would recommend, if you'd like to go further, Helen of Helen's Closet is the co-creator of the Love to Sew podcast with her friend Caroline from Blackbird Fabrics, and it's a podcast for people who love to sew and everything garment sewing. So sewing techniques, deep dives into different kinds of fabrics, fashion trends, and how to incorporate them into your wardrobe, and then interviews with sewing creatives, which are especially fascinating. And so I highly recommend following that podcast if you're interested. The third pattern brand that I would recommend is one of my absolute tried and trues, and I think that this is the pattern brand that I started sewing the most after I got through the very beginning projects with Seamwork. I started sewing, for example, Sew Over It patterns. Sew Over It is a pattern company based in the UK that creates vintage style patterns. When they first started, I think they were mostly inspired by creating vintage style patterns from, for example, the series Mad Men. I think they have a few based on that series, such as the Betty dress, the Joan dress, and now they've gone more in the direction of contemporary patterns that are quick to sew but that incorporate vintage details. And they have a plethora of sewing patterns, and especially beginner patterns to get into sewing. This pattern brand has for an ethos to get people into sewing and to teach how to sew as you sew, and so it's very much integrated in everything that they do. This is how I was able to incorporate more vintage style pieces or details into my wardrobe versus being restricted to the contemporary trends and styles dictated by ready-to-wear fashion. This is how I learned, for example, that I absolutely love boat necks or 3/4 length sleeves. That was Sew Over It that taught me that, and so I am very thankful, and I have made many of their patterns. The Sew Over It size range is a UK size 6 to 30 or a 34 to a 60-inch hip. Their patterns are fully illustrated with basic sewing techniques described within, and then it is entirely possible to learn to sew as you sew. And what's interesting is that you'll learn to sew different vintage details as well. They also have a YouTube channel that I would suggest following if you're interested. Often what they do is the Sew Over It team will take one of their new patterns and have 3 or 4 people from the team make up their own versions of the pattern and then present it in a video. And then you get to see what the pattern looks like on different bodies, different sizes, and then different styles. For example, what kind of fabric that they chose to make it out of. And that can help a lot with figuring out what kind of fabric to purchase for a certain kind of pattern. I have made so many Sew Over It patterns over the years that I cannot list all of them here, otherwise this video will be way too long, but I'll list a few of them. So you know that I'm absolutely obsessed with the Sew Over It Edie top from their Work to Weekend ebook. I've made that top so many times because it's great for viscose jerseys, and I love sleeping in them, for example. They're just elegant and soft and comfortable. I've also made the Heather dress many times because it is the ultimate secret pajamas for work, for example, especially in the fall and winter when you just want something cozy and comfortable and stretchy to keep you warm and not limit your movements. I've made the Una dress a few different times in beautiful cotton fabrics for ultimate glamour in the spring and summer seasons. I've made the ultimate pencil skirt in lots of different thick wools and the Aran skirt in closer fitting stretch jean fabrics, both of them in the sort of pencil skirt style that I absolutely love as well. One of my absolute favorite skirts to wear that I'm excited to wear once the weather warms up soon is the Sienna skirt that I made in a white linen fabric, and that is from their Summer Dreaming ebook, and I absolutely love that one. And then I've been thinking of I've made this twice before in the past. It is the Charlotte dress, and I'm thinking of making it again because I just absolutely love that neckline. There's something very Dior and very feminine in sort of the femme fleur or the flower woman sort of inspiration that Dior inspires in that neckline and the bodice, and I just absolutely love it. So there's such beautiful details in their patterns. They have 2 free patterns if you'd like to try some of their patterns without investing a lot of money up front, and they are the Annie blouse and the Ruby skirt. These are more advanced beginner patterns, so for the courageous adventuring beginner, for example, because the Annie blouse features a lot of gathering, which can be tricky, and also is meant to be made in lighter, floatier fabrics that can be more difficult to handle. Or the Ruby skirt, it has a half elasticated waist in the back, and sometimes elastics can be fiddly when you integrate it into a waist seam, and then it has a button band in the front, and buttonholes can be scary, but you can do it. So I would recommend them for beginners as well if you're ready to take it slow and be patient and practice the methods before sewing them on your fashion fabric. And I'm thinking of making the Ruby skirt soon, so maybe I'll make a video on that and you can sew along with me with that one as well. But yeah, I highly recommend checking Sew Over It out, and I love them. The fourth pattern brand that I would recommend, and that is for me a superstar, is Closet Core Patterns. And they make cutting edge, for me, contemporary sewing patterns. And what I like about them is that they incorporate in their patterns fashion trends and sort of avant-garde fashion, but in a wearable and practical way that is suitable for all kinds of bodies, all kinds of ages, and that are classic as well and timeless in a way that you can incorporate these trends and have these garments last you more than just one season. And the quality of the instructions and the construction and the finishes are just great. And so if you're looking to get into a little bit more daring, for me, this is based on my perspective, but if you'd like to experiment a little bit more with fashion and make something that's outside of the sort of standard bodice block or skirt, then I highly recommend checking out Closet Core Patterns. They do have beginner patterns, for example, and their patterns are fully illustrated, very descriptive, and will teach you how to sew as you learn, but they do incorporate details that could be a little bit trickier to sew, like tricky corners or tricky sort of bias seams, but they will tell you how to sew it. You just might need to go slowly and practice before you embark on sewing your fashion fabric, but I think it would be worth it if those are the kinds of styles that you like to sew. Their size range is a size 0 to 32, which is a 33-inch to a 63-inch hip, and they have lots of articles on fashion trends, fashion history, sewing inspiration, and sewing tutorials, and I think some sew-alongs as well for free in articles on their website, so don't hesitate to check that out. They also have a YouTube channel where they talk about all of these topics as well, especially fashion trends, sewing inspiration, and they present their new patterns that way to show you them on different bodies and in different fabrics, so do follow them as well if you're interested in seeing these patterns and seeing their designs in more detail and in movement. My Closet Core pattern makes include the ginger jeans that I made years ago and that I still wear to this day. It is a classic wardrobe staple that I wear constantly. I've also made the Caroline pajamas, which are just a classic pajama and really comfortable and just the perfect fit, and it's great for learning how to incorporate piping into your sewing techniques as well. And then most recently I've tried making their Jenna shirt, which is a slightly oversized button-down and collared cotton shirt, and it was a bit complicated, but it's totally worth it, and it is a wardrobe staple that I'm really excited to wear this season since I made it a little bit too late in the season last year. And I think it'll serve me very well in my wardrobe for years to come. For free patterns, they have a t-shirt pattern or a sun hat for garments. I think that the t-shirt pattern, if you're interested in learning how to sew jersey fabrics, this t-shirt pattern is a classic design. Cotton jerseys are relatively simple to sew, so it'd be a great first pattern if you're looking to get into sewing jersey or stretch fabrics. And this pattern will teach you exactly the techniques that you'll need to learn to do so and get the best quality garment out of it. They also have a few accessory patterns, such as a dog coat, for example, or a sewing machine cover, or a pot holder, or a poof that a lot of sewists like to make to stuff with their fabric scraps rather than throwing them away if they have the space. If you'd like to go further, Closet Core Patterns also has the Closet Crew membership, which gives you access to exclusive patterns and video sew-alongs and access to their fitting specialist and their online sewing community. And so you get a little bit more of an in-depth experience with those patterns and with that membership. But in any case, I highly recommend checking out Closet Core Patterns. They have great contemporary sewing inspiration on both their website and their YouTube channel. Last but not least, I would highly recommend True Bias Patterns. True Bias Patterns are contemporary styles and wardrobe staples that feature clean lines and just lots of versatility. What I love about them is that their patterns are just very casual but elegant at the same time, and most of their patterns feature many variations, and so you can customize them and get a lot of pieces and styles out of one pattern. Their patterns are written with clear, easy to follow instructions, also fully illustrated with sewing techniques described within. What's great about these patterns is that the way that they're designed, they're great for more casual, natural fibers such as cotton and linen that will create sort of a casual elegance, but they also work with more luxurious fabrics such as silk or viscose, flowy fabrics that create more of a glamorous look with the same pattern. Their size range is a size 0 to 32, so a 34 to a 61.5 inch hip, and their website is really interesting. I highly recommend going and checking them out because I think they always do, for each of their patterns, a sew along on their blog, which is a step-by-step with photos of the different techniques and of the patterns so that you can follow along that way, with especially a deep dive into the different fabrics you should be looking for or that would be great with the pattern, and then the notions to look for. My True Bias makes include especially the Ogden cami that I've made multiple times because it looks absolutely beautiful in all kinds of fabrics. I've made it in tencel fabrics, I've made it in more stiffer woven fabrics, and then also in very loose flowy viscose fabrics, and it's just perfect for the summertime and for a certain elegance underneath the cardigan, for example, and tucked in. Oh, I absolutely love it. I've made the Calvin wrap dress, for example, for my birthday, and it's just this lovely strappy wrap dress that is simplistic but elegant. I made the Laura dress as well for a birthday a few years ago. It's also strappy and it features more of an empire waistline, and usually I wouldn't go for that, but with the design of this pattern, it just flows really nicely between the waist and the hips, and it's just casual and relaxed, not too tight, not too loose, and just beautiful. I made the Darla dress last summer, which is a great pattern for summer barbecues or being out and staying cool in the sun. And then most recently I made the Blair skirt out of a dark green fabric this fall, and it features a button down front and a fabric belt at the waist, and it's just pure elegance, I find, and I've been wearing it on constant rotation all winter. They have one free pattern. If you sign up to their newsletter, you can get the Jessie tee for free. It is an interesting t-shirt pattern because it features a crew neck and looser sleeves and sort of a boxy crop length or longer length. I've made this once before and my version wasn't a great success, I think because of the fabric that I chose. I don't think that the color suits me very well, and also I think if I made it again I would hack the neckline because I think that the crew neck is just a little bit too tight on me. I don't like things that touch my neck so much. But if you're looking for something that's a little bit different from, for example, the Closet Core Patterns free t-shirt that features a more classic design, then this one would be great to try out as well. And then I just love the aesthetics of True Bias patterns. I find that it's very inspiring, the earth tones and the natural colors and fabrics that they often use, and it's just lovely. So I highly recommend checking them out. So there you have it. Those are my top recommendations for the best pattern brands for learning how to sew or learning new sewing techniques. If you have more sewing experience, I'd also highly recommend these pattern brands for learning how to sew a new type of garment, for example, sewing a pair of jeans for the first time, sewing a coat, or sewing a bathing suit, for example. I'll link in the description all of the patterns that I've discussed, so don't hesitate to check them out. And then obviously there are many other pattern brands that are great for beginners and in different styles. These are just my absolute favorite and top brands that I would recommend. But if I've missed something, or if you would highly recommend another brand, don't hesitate to leave that in the comments below. We can start a conversation that way and create a great list of recommendations for beginners looking to get into sewing. And then also for me, I always love discovering new sewing brands. Don't hesitate to like this video if you did enjoy it, and subscribe so you don't miss any new videos from me. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Take care, and bye-bye.